have an incredible privilege to interview Stephanie tonight, and you have, this is like a business that like was launched 4 years ago and then skyrocketed, right? It's 4 years old, and it's called We Are Rosie. So tell us what has happened over the last 4 years. What is We Are Rosie?
Yeah, first of all, happy to be here. Thanks for having me. So I started We Are Rosie 4 years ago after a pretty interesting career in the marketing and advertising space. I left Georgia Tech and began to work for Microsoft, right, as they were beginning to reimagine the way that work happened within their own four walls. I got all this insight into how big, huge global companies didn't quite have everything figured out and how they were struggling with talent. And this was in 2006, right? So that was the very beginning of my kind of corporate career. And throughout the next, 10 years, I really started to pay attention to how talent was treated inside major corporations because I worked at them, and specifically in the marketing industry. And I started We Are Rosie 4 years ago because I saw a two-sided problem, and I thought that I could build a platform to solve for both sides of the equation. So the problems that we were solving for when we started We Are Rosie was, on one side, I saw massive pent-up demand from people who wanted or needed to work in a more flexible way. So these are people who maybe need to take some time off to deal with a medical issue. Maybe they need to be a caregiver for somebody in their family. Maybe they want to travel for 3 months. Maybe they're having an existential crisis and they want off the hamster wheel of kind of this very hierarchical career path. Any number of reasons, right, that people may want or need to work in a flexible way. I think probably most people here have felt that at some point in their career where some flexibility would have been great. And then on the flip side of that, we're seeing huge global brands saying, I need more flexibility in my workforce, actually, as particularly in marketing where We Are Rosie sits. These CMOs from big companies were saying to me, Steph, like, we just can't sign a budget to a Madison Avenue agency for a year at a time anymore. We really need to be able to allocate our budget in chunks in a more agile capacity, but we don't know how to do it, right? Because everybody's tethered to the FTE, full-time employee model. And I thought, light bulb moment, why don't we connect all these people that want to work in a flexible way with work that can happen in a flexible way with these marketers?
And how many people are you making those connections with right now?
Yeah, we have 16,500 people on our platform today.
16,000.
Yeah.
And okay, so let's take a step back and kind of your backstory, I think, fueled a lot of this. So can you share a little bit about your backstory?
Yeah, so I'm an Atlanta native. My father immigrated to Atlanta from Palestine, so he spent much of his childhood in a Palestinian refugee camp, has a third grade education, and came to the States to kind of build a better life. He ran a red light, fortuitously, and crashed into my mom's car at the corner of Briarcliff and Claremont. That intersection is wild. And so totaled my mom's car 50 years ago, and they've been married pretty much, a year later they got married. So grew up in this mixed race, mixed religion, mixed languages, mixed, continents born on, culture, and just had such a deep appreciation for diversity in my own family and the rich cultures that I got to grow up in. And then, what was the question, Jeff?
Yeah. Yeah, like how did this storyline help create We Are Rosie?
Perfect, yeah. So my whole life I've kind of viewed people who have been marginalized, right? I've seen it in my own family. I've seen the way my dad is treated differently than I'm treated. His name's Ramadan Mahmoud El Nadi. He's got brown skin and a thick accent. And so I've just had this acute awareness to how even inside my own family, where we're different education levels, we're different races, we're different religions, people are handed different levels of privilege. So I think for me to spot this problem where the fundamental way work happens that we've all accepted for 100 years since the 40-hour work week was rolled out to all of us was not working for so many people. And so that was really what gave me the ability to kind of see the challenge from all of the people who have been marginalized by the system of work and to seek out a solution for them.
And a majority of the people that you serve are coming from a marginalized perspective, right? Is that how you would explain it, or how would you explain the people group you're serving?
Yeah, I mean, I would explain that, the majority of people are marginalized by the way we insist work happens at some point in their career. Like, I don't care who you are or where you come from. The rigidity of the corporate America specifically is what I'm talking about, does not serve everybody, right? And we're humans first, we're not worker bees. And so at some point in your career, I look at my husband, who's a white man with a lot of privilege, but he couldn't take time off to care for me when I had postpartum depression after the birth of my daughter, right? He was given, 1 week from a major tech company, and that didn't serve him at that time, right? And so when I think about these little micro instances that we all just kind of deal with, we're all like, well, that's just the way it is. I'm pushed to think that there's a better way, and that we need to be considering, okay, what about in those moments if my husband's able to say, hey, whoever I work for, I need 6 weeks to care for my wife. She's really struggling, and for my new baby. And if the company says no, that he's got options, right? He could hop onto a flexible career platform and say, you know what, I've got a new baby at home. For the next year, I want to work in a more flexible way. I want a job that caps my hours at 40 hours a week. I want a job where I don't have to travel. And a platform like what We Are Rosie has built would allow him to do that, right? That's the future that I want to build for everybody.
And part of that story, I think, is your story, right? Like, you're a mom, you're a business owner, an executive, you have a family, and how has that shaped what you've been building?
Yeah, I mean, the business is named after my youngest daughter. It's created minor tension with my older daughter, but we'll worry about that later. I didn't really think that through because they were babies when I started the company, but of course it's a big part of who I am. My children are now 6 and just turned 9, and I think about the fact that with We Are Rosie being a little over 4 years old now, my children have each spent more than half of their lives competing with this business for my attention. And there's no way to sugarcoat that, right? Like, this business and the way that it's grown in such a rapid way, it is a force. It's a member of my family, It sits there. It's kind of ever present. And I think, I made the decision to grow the business really fast. I didn't put the brakes on, and I had a group of people around me that were down for that challenge. But of course, there are sacrifices you make along the way, and I think it's important to talk about those. In my family specifically, because at least I'm self-aware enough to know that I have no throttle and that this was never intended to be a lifestyle business. When I decided to do it and I had quit my job, my husband and I sat down and we said, okay, I have no throttle. I want to change the world with this business. We have 2 babies at home. What are we going to do? And my husband, bless him, said, Steph, I've got you. Whatever you need from me. He said, how much time do you need? And I said 2 years, which was not accurate. But
which has now been 4 years.
It's been 4 years, yeah, it's fine. But he said, Steph, I've got it, right? Like, I'll be the contact for the teachers. The doctors can call me, which was like it's really hard to get doctors and teachers to call your husband, I've learned. But he took that role in for our family, and so it's been hard, right? It's messy. It's not always pretty. I don't always feel great about it. The days can be really hard, but I like being a CEO. I have to find the places to focus my attention that will give my family the highest impact when I'm present.
So you chose to kind of bootstrap the business for a bit. Why did you do that, and what did you learn through that process?
Yeah, I started the business with $10,000 of our savings. That was the amount. My husband was like, okay, 10 grand, let's see if what this looks like. Let's try it for 6 months. And I was like, okay, that's a good, I'm very competitive, so it's a good parameter for me. And I chose to bootstrap it because, look, I had worked in corporate America. I had made a great living. I was making 7 figures working for other people before I started We Are Rosie. And so for me to walk away from all of that, and to take this flyer on myself, I really knew I wanted the business to be a representation of me. This was a very personal and even spiritual journey for me, building We Are Rosie. And I didn't want, frankly, any other energy in the business. I didn't want, money is energy. And I thought, I'm going to go build this thing. I want it to be a representation of me and this early founding team. And so that was really important for me in the early days. I didn't want anyone to mess with the vision that I had in my mind.
I love that. I love what you're saying about that, because I think we work with so many people launching things. They don't really know what to do. Does someone want to invest in it? Do they not want to? I love that you said, okay, we set aside this amount of money, this amount of time, and let's see what happens, right?
Yeah.
And at some point, your husband was like, and you were like, we have to keep going, right? Like
yeah,
it
absolutely.
just took off.
Yeah, it took off. I mean, we did over $1.3 million in sales in our first 9 months. And it was me and our nanny at the time, who I had completely bamboozled into working part-time on this idea with me while my kids were at school. But yeah, we started to get traction really quickly, and we're really fortunate. We were right place, right time, but we worked our butts off too.
I love it. So you were previously in like big tech,
Yep.
right? And you made this shift. You like during COVID, you're working from home, you're launching this thing, you're trying to figure it out. What did you learn in that transition? I guess like, are you now as a leader, you're like, I'm turning into a massive corporation, or are you like, I'm gonna do this different?
Yeah, I mean, my career was interesting in that I actually fell in love with startups working at huge corporations. So when I was at Microsoft and AOL, they were acquiring startups all the time, right, to maintain their relevance in the marketing sphere. And that's where I fell in love with startups, because we would acquire these teams of people that had just done the thing, right? They had just sold their company. It's what they had all worked so hard for however many years. And their energy was contagious. So they're dropped into this like bureaucratic, matrixed behemoth. And I was like a moth to the flame. I was like, tell me more. Like, they were getting stuff done. They weren't getting like holed up in all the bureaucratic nonsense and political bullshit that was happening internally. And I just loved everything about them. And that's where I really fell in love with startups. And it also showed me that you can have that energy even in a major corporation. As We Are Rosie has grown, I mean, we're just over 4 years, and we're now 60 employees, and that happened really quick, right? As you can imagine, we've hired 30 people since the beginning of this year. Honestly, I think parenting has really helped me out with this, right? Because for anyone in the audience who's a parent or has been around children, the one thing that you learn for certain is that nothing lasts forever. As soon as you think you know what you're doing, you realize like you're onto something new, you don't know what you're doing, and you got to learn again.
Can anyone relate with that?
Anyone been there?
Yes.
I'm living that dream every day. But it's certainly true for starting a business. So the stuff that worked really well for us in leadership in the early days, which was roll up your sleeves, get in the trenches, do the thing, call the clients, fix the problems, whack-a-mole all day long, does not actually serve us, right? And I can't continue to show up like that as the leader of a 60-person company. And so, you know, I think the greatest lesson I've learned is that nothing lasts forever, and that if you want to be the CEO of a company that's growing and changing really quickly, you have to have a commitment to growth. Like, I am constantly asking myself, how do I become the next version of myself that the company needs to reach the next level? Because who I am today is not who I need to be for this company to be worth $1 billion or to be a community of 100,000 people. And it's just this growth mindset that you just have to embrace and chase every day.
It's not often I talk to people that say, what do I have to do to make $1 billion company? That's not the typical response. Like, it's not part, but that is what you're creating.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that's it. The vision you have is incredible.
Thank you.
And for that to happen, you have to recruit people.
Yep.
Right? So you have up to 60 employees, you have 16,000 contracted contractors, depending on projects. How do you find great people today?
Well, knocking on all the wood, or fake wood. We've never had a hard time recruiting, and it really comes down to, I think, one thing. We have always been very candid and transparent and open about what we stand for. We Are Rosie is in the business of providing access and opportunity and wealth to people that are traditionally left out of the room when those things are handed out. That's who we are. That's what we care about. We care about diversity. We care about equity. We care about inclusion. We're not afraid to take a political stance. And we turn some people off because of that, right? But I'm okay with that because I want the business essence to stand for something. I don't want to be, plain, boring toast company that, is trying to pander to everybody. I'm okay with planting a flag and saying this is what we're all about publicly. It's on our website, it's in our social media, it's in our email newsletters. You know who we are. And so because of that, I'm sure we repel some people. Luckily, I don't hear too much about that. But we are this beacon for people that share our values, right? Which is a superpower, because now we have this company of 60 people that have flocked to the We Are Rosie mission because in some way it resonates with them. Something about what we're doing speaks to them. And honestly, it's the same with our clients, right? Our clients see themselves in this mission. They say, God, I would have loved to work this way when I, had this diagnosis, or when my child was born, or when I was caregiving for a parent, or when I was just tired, right? And so I think standing for something is the best way to attract. For us, we found both our employees and our clients.
I love it. The amount of stories being written right now about what you're doing, and accolades, and you're joining some Hall of Fame next week, I don't know, next month that you've been awarded. How are you dealing with the combination of oh, look at all these amazing things they're doing, and you still have work to do, right?
Yeah.
What have you learned through that PR side of things?
I've learned to be careful what you wish for. So because we were a bootstrap tech company in Atlanta, we didn't get any attention for the first, 3.5 years of the business. It wasn't until it hit the papers that we brought on a private equity investor that valued the company at $110 million that the roof came off. And I had always had a chip on my shoulder. I was like, why isn't anybody paying attention to us? Why aren't they writing about us? We've created this movement. It's so meaningful. And that was my competitive spirit. And then all of a sudden the dam broke. And everybody was paying attention. Everyone was like, wait, what's been happening? What have you guys been doing for 4 years? Why didn't you tell us? And I was like, we were trying to tell you. And so I've learned a lot of things, right? To your point, I now have 2 jobs. I feel like I am the CEO of the movement of We Are Rosie, which is showing everybody that you can do work in a really human-centric way, and that we can create work opportunities and careers that are fully flexible alongside people's lives. And that's really important work, because we're building a new category, right? So we have to expand people's minds, right? It's like the transition from taxis to Uber, right? Or Blockbuster to Netflix. We've all heard that analogy. Somebody has to be out ahead of it, saying, this is the vision, get on board, everybody. So that's a really important part of my job. And then, yes, I still run the company day to day. So I think of it as the movement CEO and the internal CEO. And it's a balancing act, right? And it frankly, at this rapid growth clip, I have to show up every day and decide what's more important in that moment. And what's burning the brightest and requires my attention. But man, I've got to rely on this kick-ass leadership team.
I didn't ask you this question ahead of time, but I'm curious. If someone was right now thinking about investing that $10,000 in their idea, what advice would you give them?
Wow. Figure out how to get some sales quick, I'm a salesperson by trade, and so it will look different for everybody, right? I'm not a coder, even though I went to Georgia Tech. I got a management degree, shamefully, as everyone says at Georgia Tech. But, I think for me, it was talk to as many people as you can. I called in every favor, every bit of goodwill I had garnered over the first 10 years of my career, and said, hey, remember me? I was your sales partner 5 years ago when you were at Bank of America. Now you're leading marketing at Google. Can I talk to you about what I'm doing? I'd love to get your opinion. People love to give you their opinion, right? And that's free. So it was just all this research, and then it became, at the end of every one of those calls, hey, who else should I talk to about this idea? Who else can poke holes in this idea for me? And before I knew it, we had our first 10 customers, right? Because I was telling these people about it, they were getting to poke holes in it, and they were saying, I need this actually in my organization, or you should talk to my buddy in the department next to me, or my friend, that she was just saying that she needed a more flexible pool of talent for her organization. And so it started to unfold naturally, but you've got to find those hacks where you can get stuff for free, and information from your customers for free is really top notch. But I'll say I was overwhelmed by how excited people were to give me their opinions.
I love it. What's the future of We Are Rosie? I mean, 4 years in, what's the future?
The future is huge for this company, right? We've barely scratched the surface in the marketing industry. This is a multi-billion-dollar industry. We're disrupting ad agencies, consultancies, staffing firms. So the sky's the limit for us in the vertical where we exist now. My hope is that flexible career platforms become the norm across every industry, right? There should be a flexible career platform for financial individuals, for lawyers, for everything, right? How do we create work that aligns with how humans live and stop trying to fit humans into this outdated way of how work happens? We have technology, we don't have to do that anymore. And I hope to continue being that lighthouse for both the marketing industry, but also every industry, to show them that you don't have to sacrifice quality to treat people with dignity and respect, and to give them work that aligns with who they are as a whole human being.
Let's thank Stephanie for sharing with us today. That was amazing. Thank you.